The Honourable Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, that was another speech that just shows how financially illiterate people are on the opposition benches. Here's the line: you borrow to save, because the only way of which the government in the next year would be able to provide the $1,000 kickstart for KiwiSaver is to borrow the money. And so the members opposite have got this sort of smoke and mirrors that somehow if the government goes and borrows money to save, that somehow you're better off. Now that is a loopiness that reflects why they're on those benches and we're over here. The second point I wish to make is with respect to the issue of New Zealand's net foreign investment position. I agree with Mr O'Connor that it's absolutely critical that we grow the net wealth of this country. But I want to invite the member to have a look at the budget tables. What it shows is over the course of the years of which Mr Damien O'Connor was in government, New Zealand's net investment position declined in every single year. In fact, Mr O'Connor, look at the figures for 2008, in which New Zealand's balance of payments was at a record, the worst in 50 years, of -9%. Look at what New Zealand's net investment position was when you left the Treasury benches, where we'd reached the point of -100% of GDP, a figure that has consistently improved, and in these budget documents shows it's continuing to improve. Now, Mr Speaker, let's come to KiwiSaver. When KiwiSaver, and I sat where Damien O'Connor sits on opposition benches, the government of the day said that they had a target that by 2015 there would be 700,000 people in KiwiSaver. 700,000. Do you know, Mr Speaker, how many people are in KiwiSaver now as a consequence of the change savings culture? There are 2.4 million in KiwiSaver. 2.4 million. So how can the members opposite bleat, whinge and moan that we have not changed the savings culture of New Zealand when we now have 2.4 million, over three times as many as what the architect of KiwiSaver promised us back in 2007 when the scheme was launched. But, Mr Speaker, I want to talk about broader superannuation issues, because I listened to the radio yesterday and heard the Leader of the Opposition say that it's now Labor Party policy to means test superannuation. Now, I was saying to myself, well, that sounds a little bit like policy on the hoof. I could hear the jitters right through Labor's ranks as they realised that their latest Leader of the Opposition has suffered a severe dose. I'm sorry? Policy on the hoof. Well, I'm sorry. Does that member support the means testing of superannuation? Yes. Answer the question. Answer the question. Does the member support his leader's statement yesterday that they want to means test superannuation? You see, what we know is going on is that Andrew Little has a secret plan for New Zealand and he won't come clean. We found out yesterday, we got a window into his ideas for New Zealand, and he's got a sneaky plan to change New Zealand's superannuation, of which I know in my electorate in Nelson will see their Labor support further plummeting from the lowest levels ever that they achieved in the 2014 election. You see, the problem, Mr Speaker, is that members opposite know how to moan. They're quite good at it. They know how to whinge. They know how to criticise, but they are absolutely blank when it comes to a positive plan to take this country forward. It's so illustrated by what's happened with the bills flowing from this year's budget. You see, they criticise the support that we're providing in our Hardships Children package and then vote for the bill. But here's the contradiction. Members opposite can't vote for a bill that provides for more support for New Zealand's poorest families in one breath, then in the next breath vote against the changes that will enable us to fund that, and then in the third breath criticise us because the surplus is not big enough. Well, I'm sorry, it's time for them to go back to Primer 1 or Year 1 maths. Your numbers have to add up. Budgets are about choices. We're making wise choices that enable us to support those families that are most in need, while at the same time being fiscally responsible. My very last point is this, Mr. Speaker. I've heard in this budget debate the whinging and moaning about the variation of the government's budget figures that showed that over the last year, rather than receiving a surplus of 0.4 billion, we have a deficit of 0.6, a variation of 1%. I would remind members opposite, before they give one of those chest-pumping, vein-breaking speeches about the evils of that, what happened in Labour's last budget. They promised a surplus of 1.3 billion. They actually delivered a deficit of over 3 billion and were out by over 5 billion. That is, they were out by 8% in their numbers. Bill English was out by 1%. Members on this side know the definition of good fiscal management. We are the first OECD country to be back in the black. We've got increasing surplus into future years, increasing surpluses into future years, and that is a fiscal record to be proud of. And if any member doubts it, I just ask them to have a look across the Tasman, where last week they delivered a budget with a $40 billion deficit, a $40 billion deficit. Deficits out into the next 3 years, and that just illustrates how well we are doing. And Mr. Speaker, the final proof of the pudding is this. New Zealand know we're doing well. That's why this month, for the first time, well, they know they don't, we'll explain this. Why is it for the first time in 20 years there are more New Zealanders choosing to come home than leaving? Are they wrong? They are absolutely right. They know this is a country that is doing well, a country that has a plan, a country that has a Prime Minister and a Deputy Prime Minister who mean what they say and do what they say, as illustrated in this budget, and I'm proud to be part of this bill that is part of ensuring fiscal discipline and the right choices for our country.
Speaker, I call